remember yesterday, I was trying to make the case not that these were dots to be connected, but that these were elements that were part of what we're calling the sexual revolution. There is so much that can be said on it. There's so much. I could have went further even prior to this, which I did in the previous years. I didn't this year for no real reason. But we can talk about, how the Enlightenment, Protestant Reformation undermined religious authority and also helped build up what we call individualism and such. But what I did at least point out that with Malthus, we're talking a concern for overpopulation. The Comstock laws, which were those laws that were enacted by Protestant legislator and considered birth control to be obscene. The point there was to say that even if today the Catholic Church is the only Christian denomination opposed to birth control or contraception, why were they opposed to it? And if they're no longer opposed to it, what changed, all right? And I tried to show Lambeth in 1930 as the first historical moment that we have when any Christian denomination permitted or lift the condemnation on oral contraception, not oral contraception. So if people say, well, how do we know if any churches were, for it before, prior to that? Well, we have no record of anything, all right? That'd be a case you'd have to make. And by the way, the contraception that they were talking about then obviously was not the oral hormonal pill. It was spermicides, condom, withdrawal, sponges, and such, all right? And then Margaret Sanger comes along in this environment of concern for overpopulation, eugenics connection, women's suffrage is pulling through there. But she linked birth control with eugenics, all right? And then I real briefly showed you a clip from her Birth Control Review newspaper, just to give you, a taste on or the flavor of how they were anticipating that birth control could be used to bring on a race of thoroughbreds, all right? Then I know we started more on the historical context, and the point that I was trying to make here with William Reich and such was that with Sigmund Freud and his psychotherapy, a lot of the neuroses that adults have are thought to be a result of some unresolved conflict when we were little. It could even be like the trauma of birth itself. So Sigmund Freud associated this with sexuality. So we have terms like oral retention or oral fixation or anal retention, Oedipus complex. In other words, is a man marrying a woman and finding love, trying to undo the repression that he felt in the separation of from his own mother. In other words, the Oedipus complex is the man trying to reassociate through another woman, symbolic as his mother, making up for the separation that he had from her when he was younger. All right. William Reich, who was one of Freud's students, then took this understanding of human sexuality, and said that the violence and the class distinctions, these things are caused by our sexual repression. So just like other neuroses in the person, perhaps neuroses within society itself can be thought of as being found in repression. So if we can go against conformism, if we have a morality based on pleasure, then there'll be a release for this type of sexuality repression, and maybe that will reduce violence and also class disparities. So a combination of sex and anarchy. And then I talked about Michael Foucault, and I also said, how I love, bless you, I love the group Queen, right? But there's, as great as a talent as Freddie Mercury was, he was actually, a sexual deviant to the nth degree. I mean, there really wasn't many things that were off limit for him, likely with Michael Foucault, right? So he wanted a sex-affirming culture, and the idea is that this would be a way to overthrow the power structures. He called it a more devious and a more, discreet form of power. Now, if we find that odd, if we find it funny that, who would think such a thing? Remember, I brought up these two slogans from Brave New World. So if you remember me just saying something about Brave New World for an illustrative context, is in 1984, George Orwell created a dystopian Oceania, right, country, where we will not allow people to read books. They're not allowed to write, they're not allowed to read. But Aldous Huxley's Brave New World did it a different way. He said, rather than forbidding somebody to read, let's keep them so preoccupied and so distracted with pleasure that they're not going to care to read. So rather than telling them they can't read, we'll let them do whatever they want, but they're going to go after pleasure rather than reading. So he says we live in a world where, you take Soma, right, the pill to make you feel good, go on a Soma holiday, or make sure that, there's no connection between procreation and sexuality, or even love and sexuality. So everybody belongs to everybody else. Promiscuity is a citizen's duty. Now, if that sounds so far-fetched, have we been diverted? In other words, rather than somebody trying to mind control us, are we being played? Are we being so distracted by the pleasures and the material gains in our world that we no longer are reflective individuals? I was reading about this art historian who's so concerned about younger people and how classical art will play in their lives, because she says, I wonder if people are going to have the wherewithal to sit in front of a painting for an hour and a half, and just contemplate it, as people have done. Are we so ready, for the next flashy thing? Remember I told you there was some study, I don't know how accurate it was, that, a teenager's attention span is now 8 seconds. Now, I'm not saying you can't pay attention longer than 8 seconds, but that when you're looking at a screen, on average 8 seconds before you need to look at the next thing. She worries about how this goes with art. Okay, so anyway. Now, even in the secular world, if you just go and look, I don't care if you look at YouTube videos on the sexual revolution, or if you go and read journal articles, or if you read William Reich's book, The Sexual Revolution, which kind of ushered in, they say, the 60s and libertines. The pill is a game changer. So this Dr. Pinkers invented it, per se, in 1957, and it was made then widely available in 1960. So now available widespread, the link between procreation and the sexual act have been separated. Okay? The link between procreation and the sexual act have been separated. So I'm asking a rhetorical question. If the majority of young girls are on the pill and they're sexually active, is there any constant concern of being pregnant? Probably not. The fact that would not be a common concern means we've separated the sexual act from procreation. Now, obviously I'm older than you. And were girls on the pill when I was in high school? Probably some. Not many. And the reason why I say not many is because girls always said, I'm not doing it because I'm not getting pregnant. A person wouldn't voice that concern if they were on the pill, right? So does that mean that there wasn't sexual promiscuity? No. That means, though, without it being so common, people still got it in their heads that sex and procreation, that's kind of what it was intended for, all right? So anyway, this now widespread has been a game changer. So what we see, and I'll have a pop-up here to help explain this, is we see the advent of a singles culture, all right? So TV shows like Sex and the City wouldn't make a lot of sense, back in the 60s or the 50s. Not because they were so prudish, because, I never watched it, but I guess it's four, unmarried, promiscuous girls that, somehow mix their sexual life and their careers. Well, that would make no sense in the 40s and the 50s, because everybody would have said, well, they're going to get pregnant real soon. You can't have that many sexual relations and not get pregnant, right? So there had to be, and plus, people would have probably also refrained from it, just thinking, well, aren't they ever going to get married? Who would just wants to keep doing that, right? So we see now something that's arising. Here's a little screenshot from an article off of PBS. it says now societal emphasis on virginity in marriage, which, again, there was never a golden age, right? But, for a girl to save herself for marriage and to be married was a goal. Well, then it's kind of replaced with the single life and sexual exploration. In other words, get it in now, because once you're married, you will not have the opportunity. Hugh Hefner, the fact that his whole image is a playboy himself, the smoking jacket with the pipe, beautiful girls around him. That's not an image that would have worked earlier, okay? By the way, do you know what has changed with the Playboy magazine in the last year? Does anybody read that on the news? What, Joey?
They don't post anything.
Yeah, do you find that odd? I mean, you need to be very, astute, reflective, and a cultural critic. Think about that. A magazine that was founded on showing nude women can no longer sell a magazine with nudes in it. I mean, they didn't make that. They didn't start putting, pictures with girls with their clothing on because somehow they hit a moral high ground. They just realized the atmosphere has changed. What's changed? It's not salacious enough. I mean, it's like a person who struggles with alcoholism. When they drink, they build up, a resistance. So you can have people that, if you drink 2 or 3 beers every night, it's not going to be long before it's going to take 4 or 5. It happens with drugs. It happens with other things. It happens with sex. At some point, it no longer satisfies, so you need something more salacious. So we're to the point now where the new woman just doesn't do it anymore. There has to be something, other elements, and they didn't want to go that direction. I find that kind of, interesting. Anyway, movies. James Bond movies would have made no sense, right, in the 20s, or even, earlier. Because who is this guy going out single life, never getting married? So the idea of bachelor, right? And then, obviously, woman came from that. Did anybody ever see the movie? My wife was watching it last night. Sweet Home Alabama, with what's the girl's name in it? Reese Witherspoon. Okay. Do you know her fiance's mom? Not the one she wound up marrying, but the one that was from New York. If you can picture that woman, her name's Candace Bergman. In the 1980s, she was in a sitcom known as Murphy Brown. She was a corporate executive making a lot of money and a single mom. Now, there was a vice president at the time, Dan Quayle, who really, it was kind of like one of these politicians that would misspeak, and then because he didn't have like a very strong intellectual image, the media would pound on him. And, as an aside, I never liked that. The biggest problem with the media and anybody who gives into it, every time somebody makes a misspeak or something, they pound it. Like Barack Obama, I remember one time when he was campaigning, he said, I visited all 53 states in this country. I mean, does anybody really think that he thought there was 53 states? The guy was tired. He just misspoke, right? But people jumped on it. Like, the guy doesn't even know how many states there are. Well, that's what happened to this guy, Dan Quayle. He made a statement about Murphy Brown. He says, look, why are they glamorizing single motherhood? Well, you can only imagine how Hollywood came out and bashed him. But he had a point. The fact that that woman was a corporate executive, and had, nannies or whatever taking care of her kids, that was not the paradigm in our country of single mothers. I mean, the average single mother did not have, they lived a life quite different than that, probably one closer to poverty, all right? Anyway, Helen Gurley Brown's book, Sex and the Single Girl, probably, foresaw Arcane Pryor, obviously, and led the way for Sex and the City, where you have a career woman with open sexuality, right? So this whole idea of that either you become married or you become an old maid, for whatever reason, was dismantled, okay? Okay, so what happens then, and we're going to do the so-called church's response another day. By the way, on Monday we'll probably have a quiz on the human sexuality in this, okay? And I'll put up a review tomorrow or Saturday morning, probably tomorrow before I leave. I'm going to have to dramatize this a little bit so you get it. By the 1960s, we have the pill that's been available. Every single Christian denomination at this point has accepted contraception as morally acceptable. when the Catholic Church, by the way, they set out a commission. Everybody thinks this stuff's kind of like just done by stodgy old men behind closed doors. Pope Paul VI said, we need to form a commission. I want people to study this. What should be our response? Should we accept this? Should we look at this? How does this work? What should be the response? Well, everybody in the world knew that this commission had been assembled. They all knew that they were looking at the issues of contraception and birth control. What do you think the world thought they were going to say? Anybody want to venture a guess? They thought they were going to accept it. They just thought, I wonder how they're going to word it. I wonder if they're going to say it's okay as long as it's in marriage. What happened was the opposite. Pope Paul comes out with this document, Humanae Vitae, this encyclical, means on human life, and he restates the Catholics' opposition to it. I can't tell you what the reaction was to this. Politicians, priests, moral theologians took out a full-page ad in the New York Times condemning the Pope's backwardness concerning this. This was not a pretty time. More Catholic priests and nuns left their religious vocations and priesthood after the 60s than they did during the Protestant Reformation. This was not good. In 1977, when Pope Paul VI was going over all his encyclicals and talking about them, little snippets about it, when he got to Humanae Vitae, all he said was, I did not disobey the truth. I did not disobey the truth. Okay? So here's what he said in a nutshell. And all I want you to write down are the 4 numbered things. Don't worry about the bullets. The 4 numbered so-called predictions. He said, if we, as a world community, accept, the ubiquitous use of contraception, there will be a moral decline and an increase. And by the way, that's an increase in infidelity, not an increase in fidelity. It's an increase in infidelity. He says you will see a rise in divorce, which the 1972 no-fault divorce didn't help. He said you'll see a rise in infidelity. You'll see a rise in abortion. Now, isn't that counterintuitive? You'd think more contraception, less abortion. But see, you guys should already know better, because I showed you the data from the Alan Guttmacher Institute that actually 54% of people getting an abortion were on contraception when they got pregnant. All right? Out of wedlock pregnancies. Well, you already said how many fatherless families do we have, and other perversions. He said, the second point, there'll be a loss of respect for the woman. Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive because you have a person like Margaret Sanger and other feminists saying that this is actually pro-woman. He says, no, it's actually going to hurt the woman. And he says, because a woman's physical and psychological equilibrium must be maintained. In other words, I'm going to do one day next week just to wrap this up so you get it. But a woman's biology pertaining to her fertility, it's internal. Okay? A woman knows her cycles. Men, it's outside of us. The fertility's in you. You know your cycles. The closer that we can get your psychological and physiological equilibrium together, the more respect a man's going to have for you and your cycles. In a sense, what Pope Paul VI was saying is that the man has to respect this psychological cycles equilibrium of the woman. If she's on the pill, he will expect her to be sexually ready when he's ready. That's kind of what he means by that. I don't think that's an outlandish thing to say. Abuse of power. We know there were countries that have used this to help control their populations. And then he says, too, the notion of unlimited dominion over one's bodies. It will develop that we can control our bodies in any which way, which means that eventually we will accept euthanasia. IVF. We now, as of last year, they could do 3 biological parents. They could take the mitochondrial DNA out of one, put it into another, and then fertilize it with a sperm, where you can actually have 3 biological parents. I've already said to you this year, they have just released that they have created the Evitar, where they took actual organs of the woman that were donated, and they have created this organic female reproductive system outside of the woman. Now, why do they do it? For studying, the medicines, the effects, and just, for scientific enlightenment. When the man who was interviewing the scientist said, do you have any intentions of turning this into an artificial womb where you can conceive a child in this organic contraption and bring it to term? He says, we have no concern ever to try that. But the interview asked the wrong question. He shouldn't have asked, are you going to do this? He should have said, do you suspect anybody will try it? Because then I think the guy said yes. And now they're going to start working on what they call the manotar, where they can look at the male reproductive system. So Brave New World, where we're having the child decanted, we're getting closer to that, right? So maybe a person is saying, and maybe you're even thinking, well, but a person does have total autonomy over their body. It's my body. Who can tell me what to do? No one has total autonomy over your body. You can't harm yourself. You can't donate an organ. You can't sell an organ. If it was your body, you should be able to sell a kidney. And then if somebody arrested you for it, you should explain to the judge this is your body. You cannot do that, right? So nobody has total autonomy. All he said was, this is going to start giving us the impression that we do, right? So you already have people saying, you know, if I can choose when I die, isn't that part of my right? We already forget how we're connected to everybody else. Yes, Renee?
What about when you share the womb?
I'm sorry, what?
When you share the womb, like you don't want to conceive the baby, you give it to someone else. Is that like that?
Oh, you're talking about surrogacy. Well, yeah, but I mean, the whole act, I mean, first of all, how did that woman get pregnant? You know, either she had sex with the husband, or the husband's sperm was inseminated within her, or is it her egg and the husband's egg, or is it the wife's egg and the husband's egg that was conceived in vitro and then they implanted the embryos? I mean, you know, how do you get to that point? There's no way to get to that point. Remember I said that from the church's point of view, everybody has the right to be born out of the love act of a man and a woman. You know, we have that, you know, it's almost like that's our right. It should not be taken away from us. I should know that I came into the world out of a love act, all right? So, again, I'll talk about this one day next week, so-called theology of the body, what we call a human love and the divine plan. John Paul II says, you know, an appeal to the human heart. The body stands as a sign of the nuptial mystery of man and woman. All right? So you're going to have to think back to signs. Conventional signs, natural signs. The male and female is a sign of the nuptial union. All right? So the sign of the nuptial woman of man and woman. This is in itself a sign. By the way, we're going to talk about homosexuality, sexuality, and gender and stuff. We're not going to get into gender theories per se. But there's a lot going on today in the world, you know, talking about transgendering and such. But there's also not a lot of consensus or discussion on, you know, what exactly does it mean to be male or female? You know, for instance, are those social constructs? Oddly enough, depending on the college you go to, if you go to Temple and take a course on gender theory, ironically enough, you'll never get any biology in it. They'll never discuss the biological foundation of male and female, which is odd because when somebody transgenders, how can you transgender from male to female unless male is this and female is that? Logically, you can't. I mean, before you transgender, you have to say, this is what a male is, and this is what a female is. If there's not a distinction, you can't move from one to the other, all right? Now, that's just all part of what I'm saying here. You know, if we've gotten to the point where we no longer find a truth in a particular thing, then it's going to be whatever it is you consider to be right or whatever I consider to be right, and we're all based down to opinions, all right? Anyway, any questions on this stuff? Okay, that's it.